special, as we know. And so thanks for that. And yeah, I agree and concur that the Ducks is been he's an icon of Smith Falls, and the whole family is, especially with the baseball tradition with Naughty. So thanks for that.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Brannon. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to amendments to the agenda tonight. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I'd like to make an amendment to defer the item respecting the Victoria Park campground. This comes following a meeting I had last night with REAL, the Rideau Environmental Action League. They had only just received this report at the same time we did. And while they have provided some preliminary correspondence, I think it spoke to me that there's a bigger discussion that needs to be had about this. And I just don't think that we're going to have time tonight considering the length of the agenda that's proposed at this point. So it would be my preference to defer it, and I'd rather have the discussion around that now rather than if there are people who are listening, waiting for us to have this discussion, doing it later in the evening only to end up deferring it at that point. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I concur with that. I read the report. I think the report needs to be public for a while. I think we need some public input as well. And I don't think it's at this time that time sensitive. So yeah, I agree with Councillor Dwyer.
All right, Councillor Alford.
And again, I don't want to get into the discussion, but I'm not sure that, because that's item G, but I'm just not sure whether in this report, we've asked the question that really needs to be answered. And for me, that's whether the municipality wants to be in the campground business. So I look at having the discussion tonight, and I'm not sure that we're going to come to any conclusions. But I do think there is a potential for a good discussion tonight, not necessarily narrowing it down to any one item, because I think there's a question that needs to be asked before we discuss potential relocation sites.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alford. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I wasn't looking for any particular actionable items coming out of that discussion tonight. I was expecting more, just some dialogue and some feedback. And hopefully this could be a springboard to some public consultation, understanding that this is a very sensitive issue in our community, and there is I think a need to get public feedback. So I would prefer we move ahead and have some discussion tonight, and then if the outcome is that we can maybe share it now, obviously with the community, but to have some method of organized feedback to get from our constituents that will help maybe guide any future decisions we have on this.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I just add that the report's online. People can read it, and you know, I don't know that we're gonna. We can talk about it tonight, but in the end, we're going to be deferring it. I will be until I hear from people that I represent. So I think I would encourage people to read the report. If we could have it on the agenda, and then nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to be decided tonight. We know that. So it is a big agenda, and you know, the report's online. People should read it, and then we can go from there. If it's 2 weeks from now or a month from now, I don't know that it matters.
Councillor McKenna.
We've had several conversations on the topic. I think receiving the report and talking about it tonight just keeps the conversation moving along. I think you're right. We're going to keep at least some more input we want from our partners out there. And so, but it's not the first time. So we just keep the conversation going and keep it moving forward.
All right, thanks, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Dwyer?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate that looking at the size of the agenda and some of the more pressing things that we do have to talk about, I feel like we're going to be here until midnight anyways, and this seems like a good one to defer until we can have a more focused conversation, particularly if that conversation is going to start with a question about whether or not we want to be in the campground business, because I don't know that that's a conversation that we've had so far. We've talked about relocating. I just think that the length and breadth of discussion on this topic should almost have a council meeting dedicated to itself.
Okay, I'm not hearing a consensus on it. Councillor Allen, did you have an opinion either way?
Well, I'm disappointed that, Real doesn't feel like they've had an opportunity to respond to it. So I'm happy either way. I think it might be better, given the length of priority issues we have, to wait, and then that we can at least hear from them, whether or not. I know from sitting on Real that there's been some issues with the building, and we've talked about different things we needed to do moving forward, but this is a pretty big part of what they do, this location. So I would really like to wait till we can hear from that board.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Alford?
I feel like we're entering into the discussion as to whether or not this should be deferred. If we're going to defer something in terms of time, then I would be more open, and I raised it earlier to deferring the Parks and Rec Service sustainability review than I would this discussion on moving this forward and getting some more information and some more thoughts than Victoria Park, because we really only have till September to try and get something in place. So there is some time factors involved in this, and this could be a discussion that takes place over months. So I would be more inclined to defer the service sustainability review and continue with the Victoria Park discussion tonight.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Alford. One thing that we've been doing is every 2 weeks we've been meeting since we went online. Is there any interest from council? Maybe we meet next week or go back to weekly meetings, and then that would help split up these heavy agendas?
Yeah.
And if so, is there a consensus on what needs to be done tonight and what could be put off until next Monday? Any questions, comment? Mayor Panko?
Sure. Yeah, I think my preference, we proceed with the agenda as it is, and if we do get too late, too far down the priority items, and we need to defer, I would say we work from the bottom up. And I do believe that the Victoria Park relocation report, I mean, staff have spent an extensive amount of time with the Chamber, with Parks Canada, with all the interested parties. So I think it's important that we start a dialogue there, and even more important that we provide staff with direction as to how we want to move forward with this. And I think the direction should be, we seek more public feedback, we get written feedback from our stakeholders. And if we simply, I guess, defer it tonight, then we're not giving staff the direction we may want in order to get the feedback we want from the community.
Okay, is there a consensus for that recommendation?
Yes.
No?
I can't.
Okay, so
I can't tell who's nodding their heads.
I'm seeing a no from Nikki and Jay. Do we need to vote on it then?
You could do a straw vote, Councillor McGuire, if you'd like.
Okay, so we'll do a straw vote to remove item H, I believe, from
It's G.
G, Victoria Park Relocation Report 2020-54. All those in favor? We get 3. All those against? And we got 4. So does this mean, Nadine, just for clarification, if we get to the point it's 9 o'clock and we're only at E, we can still postpone this further on in the meeting, right?
Yes, as you as the chair have the, the right to get the consensus of council, what they like to do at that point in time.
Okay, excellent. So any other amendments to the agenda before we move on? Seeing none, we've got my agenda up here. We'll move on to disclosure of monetary interest. Any monetary interest tonight? Seeing none, we will go to adoption of the minutes. Can I get somebody to move to adopt the minutes of the May 4th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting? Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor Alford. All those in favor? Carried. So we will move on to CAO director's reports. I believe we have 5 reports tonight, CAO Morris.
Councillor McGuire, sorry, we missed the delegation with Howard Allen, item 3.
Oh, sorry, I'm moving through here.
That's okay.
Mr. Allen, here I see you're up on the screen, you're ready to go. So please take it away.
Okay, well, Nadine, you mentioned that you might have those slides available.
Yes, our IT coordinator is going to bring up your slides.
I'll just say while we're waiting for that, the process that we have for the audit is that once we complete the audit and have draft financial statements, we meet with the CEO, we met with Malcolm, and we met with Janet and Carrie and the mayor to discuss audit issues in detail and to ensure there's transparency between the audit and council. So I just wanted to look at these statements very briefly. You can see this is your statement of operations for the year, and you'll notice that our revenues are a little bit more than what we budgeted, and our expenses, our operating expenses are a little bit less. Overall, we did anticipate that we would have a deficit, and this is because we do expense depreciation or amortization. This year was about 4.3 million. And so the fact that we are showing a little deficit from operation makes sense when you consider that 4.3 million of our expenses are for an expense that we really just recognize that our capital assets are going down in value, but it's not a cash payout per se. At the bottom under other revenues, these revenues relate largely to our capital projects. They are less than what we budgeted because really I think the 2 major projects that we didn't complete as much as we anticipated were Beckwith Street and the municipal complex renovation. You'll notice that we do have a number there, 1.3 million, where we moved it to an obligatory reserve fund. This is the building permit reserve fund, and it was in our general assets before, so it was moved by council on their motion to a specific reserve fund. But overall, we ended up the year with a surplus. And if you go to, you see on the second page where it talks about our changes in net debt, you'll notice that again, our surplus of 384,000, you add to that our amortization, which was not a cash expense, and then we look at what we spent in capital items, and you'll notice that again, because we didn't spend as much as we anticipated, we actually ended up with an increase in our financial assets for the year. So we reduced our net debt, so to speak, so the total net debt of the town at the end of the year was an improvement over the previous year of about 1.3 million. So I guess you'd have to say when you look at these numbers for the year in terms of our operations, there was adherence to budget. In terms of our audit, when we went through the transactions, went through our testing, we didn't find any problems per se. The records are well done, and we're pleased with the progress that's being made in the town. I'll just say that the province recognizes the top 15 municipalities that file their financial information return the earliest. So when you think there's over 400 municipalities in the province, this year the town of Smith Falls was in the top 15. So when you think about that with COVID and all the struggles that we've had, I think our hats are off to the management team that were able to accomplish that this year. When you look at the next slide, which is the balance sheet, I believe. Yes, so on the left-hand side, it kind of shows you where our net debt is. So our net debt, as we just noticed, is around 7.6 million. And that's after you subtract all of our long-term liabilities, which are in excess of 17 million. So I think, again, compared to most towns in our position, I mean, we're continually improving. And I think it's fair to say that we've made a lot of progress financially in the last number of years. In terms of the 5-year financial review, I mean, I like to look at these just briefly, just to sort of look at the trends that the town, where we're going. And I would say that in virtually all of our financial indicators, there's been improvement. In most areas, we are in the low-risk area now, which wasn't where we were previously. You'll notice that our tax arrears as a percentage are the lowest they've been in 5 years. And I recognize with the COVID problem, this might change for this year, as all of us individuals and our businesses have struggled somewhat. But still, I think it shows you last year being a fairly normal year, 2019, that management has been working on this area. The treasurer's been working on this with her staff. Going to the next page, it sort of is the final 5-year review. I don't think there's anything too startling there. Again, you'll notice that our debt is moving down. Our debt charges, of course, we are paying off a good amount each year. Our equity positions, our reserves, all those things are improving. So I guess my sense is that, again, in 2019, that town of Smith Falls had a good year financially. And of course, the challenge is what lies ahead. I mean, clearly our recreational revenues and things of this nature are going to be greatly impacted by COVID. But perhaps not as much as it might be in large cities where they have a lot of income that relates to transit and things of that nature. But still, I know that we talked about it briefly in our meeting, and I know that Malcolm and his staff are on top of it. So if you have any questions, I'd like to try and answer them, but those are really my comments.
All right, so I wasn't able to see everybody during the presentation, but if we've got questions, now everybody's up. Any questions or comments for Mr. Allen? Councillor Brennan?
Thanks, Howard. And this is, I think, the 9th time I've seen you in the council chambers, although we're not in the council chambers, but this is the most unique time I've seen you. And, I'm happy to hear that we've had a pretty good year. And what I'd like to hear from you maybe is your thoughts on, because I know you handle this for a number of municipalities in Eastern Ontario, what your feeling is, given the uniqueness of our situation, is how you see things going forward. I know that the upper tier governments have been really proactive in terms of making sure that there's still money in the economy. And hopefully they're going to be looking at municipalities in terms of infrastructure and stimulus plans. And I know the FCM's active on that, but can you relate sort of what your feeling is on the situation for municipalities going forward in the next year or so?
Well, I think certainly some of the larger municipalities and cities have been suffering significantly. So I think when you look at Toronto and even places like Sudbury, you know, there's no question their revenues have taken a very big hit, but their expenditures are staying intact. And I think to a lesser degree, we're facing those same difficulties. I think one of the real problems that we're going to face in smaller communities is our small businesses who are struggling. And I think that, you know, in the past, many small towns had a lot of empty spaces downtown. I think councils and, you know, through economic development, there's been a lot of work people have put together to fill those holes. And I think we're going to need to be patient with some of the small business owners, because I think that that is an area where it's going to be very tough for them to come back. What I don't know, and perhaps some of you have a better idea, is whether or not this pandemic is going to change the way that we shop, that we acquire goods and services. And that could have another significant impact. I'm hopeful that our larger businesses in town will continue to prosper and do well. And I'm hopeful too that the provincial government will be transferring some monies to us. Right now, they've talked about the fact that municipalities are suffering, but I'm not aware at the present time of any specific monies that will be forthcoming that they've announced, other than to say, you know, they want to help municipalities. So I'm hopeful that if we get those items, maybe we'll be fine. But it's going to be a challenge, I think, for the treasurer and her staff and the CAO to make sure that we're on top of where we're going. I think it's important that council continue to be aware of where we stand in terms of our net expenditure or net revenues for the year from our operations, because there might have to be some changes.
Thanks, Howard, for that. Thank you.
Councillor Alford.
Just a comment. I do want to. I'm sure we all want to recognize the unique opportunity we have as a small town and the financial position that past council and our staff have put us in. I think we are well, this is going to hurt. I think we're better prepared to ride out the storm, and I think that's what I hear Howard saying than many others, and that is due largely to our treasurer. And thank you, Janet, again for getting us into the top 15. And I do think this is probably going to be a bumpy ride, but I also am grateful that we are where we are now as opposed to where we were 10 years ago.
Great, thank you, Councillor Alford. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. I was wondering with the equity in the Smith Falls Hydroelectric Company, we take off $16,000 every year. What's the reason for that write-off versus, and maybe this is a question for town staff, I'm not sure, but what's the reason we're writing that off instead of trying to liquidate it and getting it off the books?
Well, I think in terms of liquidating that for sure is a town question. But the reason that we do depreciate it every year is because, first of all, under PSAP, under the Public Sector Accounting Board principles, we are required to depreciate capital assets over its estimated useful life. There was a time, I forget, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where it was being carried at substantially more than what it is now. And we sort of looked at it and thought there should be a write down from an audit perspective because we thought the asset was overstated. So at this stage, we just are taking the amount we wrote down and we're continuing to write down our asset in accordance with general accounting principles. But in terms of what should happen to it, that certainly is a town decision.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, Howard, just could you comment a bit on some of the financial indicators, sustainability and sort of the progress that has been made over the last 5 years, and Understanding that, I mean, this is revenue coming in from our constituents, our taxpayers, who are enabling us to put the financial house in good shape. If you can comment on that, and I mean, at the same time, I want to acknowledge that it's, I mean, our growth in residential assessment has only been about 5% according to MPAC over the last 5 years, so about 1% a year, and the tax rate has changed less than 5%. Oh, sorry. And the tax rate has increased less than 5% over the last 5 years. So really, we're looking at increases below the rate of inflation on average, but we're seeing, thanks to the work of Janet and staff primarily, that our financial house is different.
Yeah, we've certainly been able to, the town's experienced good growth, as you know. I mean, in the last few years, I mean, there's been excellent growth in the town, and we've been able to take advantage of that. I think one of the things that's interesting to me, if you look at the financial indicators, the sustainability ones, if we look 5 years ago, our capital reserves were 3% of our amortization that we had taken on our assets. So basically, we bought something for $100 and we had written it down to $50. Of the $50 that we had written it down, we only had 3% of the money set aside. So a very limited amount. So at this stage, this year, we're up over 10%. I would say most municipalities, or a lot of municipalities, are probably in the 15% range. But we've really improved our financial position over time. We also have monies that don't show up in reserves now. For example, the building reserve fund, it shows in the balance sheet as an obligation. We have gas taxes that show as deferred revenues. So we really have increased our position. And over this period of time, the actual percentage of government grants we've got as a percentage of revenue have decreased. They've gone from around 17% to 15%. So my sense is that overall, we've stabilized ourselves financially. And I think, as Councillor Alford pointed out, I mean, we are in a much better position to face a crisis than we were previously. Let's face it, I mean, our federal government, they're talking about the fact that we might end up, when this is all done, $1 trillion in Ottawa. We owed, 650 billion when we started. So I think when I look at our position, I'm pretty excited as to where we've come.
Thank you.
Great, Councillor Alford. No, sorry, I thought I saw your hand there. Okay, so last call for questions, comments. CEO Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment in response to yours about the equity in the Smith Falls Hydroelectric Generating Corp. I would defer to Janet in terms of the assets. I don't think there are any assets associated with that corporate structure, but it may serve a purpose in the future if the town were ever to consider getting in the water power generation business. So I don't think it's costing us anything to keep it as it is. We're simply writing down, it's a mathematical exercise each year. So there may be a purpose in having that corporate entity exist someday in the future. But if council wanted to know more, we could certainly do some more research.
And it's also, if I stand to be corrected, it's related to the turbine too in the old water treatment plant. So until a decision's made on that, that's why we haven't gotten it off the books.
Yes, the assets really are the turbines and the control dam. They are the two things that are there.
Yeah, but personally, I'd love to get more information on that with the control dam. I think about 7,000, and the turbine really taking the bulk of that that asset value. It'd be interesting to see just what potential there is for that to do something for us in the future, but not for tonight. So, is there any other comments before we go on? Okay, seeing none, I thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. Allen. And I've got Siri here off.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to CIO directors reports. CIO Morris.
With respect, Mr. Chair, did we do the adoption of minutes? We did? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we have 5, starting with Chief Cheeseborough.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. A quick update with regards to our state of emergency. As you know, phase 1 began a week ago, and Saturday they allowed private parks and campgrounds and marinas and the boat clubs and golf courses to reopen. As of today, one of the major announcements was that all construction is to resume. So that's certainly going to have an impact with regards to building and fire inspections. In-person counseling opened up today. Retail stores with the storefront entrances for curbside pickup. Outdoor sporting fields with single individual play. Veterinary services, pet services, and animal care. I listened to the Premier's announcement today, and he's extended the order on gatherings to May the 29th. Also in today's announcement is that the schools will not be opening until September. They will be revisiting that over the next few weeks. As well, the summer camps, they're permitting the summer camps to operate for the kids. However, there will be no overnight stay at the summer camps. And another announcement today was that religious gatherings are going to be permitted. People can pull up in their vehicles and park a distance away from each other. So those are the major announcements. One of the other announcements that I advised council last week on was that I'll be working with Dr. Stewart with regards to the recovery plan. Through the health unit, we've submitted a number of suggestions from the control group and from myself regarding an open discussion on that. We're waiting to hear when that discussion is going to take place. Since our meeting on Tuesday for our emergency control group, we've seen a slight increase with regards to the number of cases in Lanark, Leeds, Grenville. Last week it was at 319 confirmed cases, and as we said today, we're at 327. Provincial and national averages have increased, but certainly we have seen a huge decline in the number of cases reported. So that's a positive situation. The mayor and I had an opportunity on Friday to do a phone-in. Well, certainly I did the phone-in interview with your TV, and there was a lot of good items that were covered during that discussion. Fire ban was one of them. Emergency responses was, and how the fire services is changing responses during the pandemic period. As well, we talked about having enough PPE on hand, which we currently have. We've received additional protective clothing in this morning, so we are in a good position. At the same time, it's extremely important to realize that while things are looking good, while things appear to be declining or flattening of the curve, now's not the time to take our foot off the gas. We have to maintain exactly what we're doing, continue to follow the public health guidelines, and I can say that the control group is working as efficiently as possible, taking a look at the recovery plan if and when we get to a point where municipal buildings and services can reopen. That is my update for tonight, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions, comments for Councillor Brennan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a few questions, Chief, and I hope you don't mind. Of course, we all follow the daily announcements from Premier Ford and what's happening. One of the ones was libraries. And the library has been closed, and we heard that a couple of weeks ago. Is the library going to reopen? And I mean, I'm getting asked these questions, so I've got several here. I'm sorry, but what about the library?
Well, in our discussion last week at the Emergency Control Group, the control group is looking and has had a discussion with Director Manhire with regards to the library, and we are looking at curbside pickup, which the discussion was. We're hoping this Thursday we'll have a final decision as to how it's going to operate. One of the key factors is to ensure that we have all the safety measures in place, certainly for the workers and for the individuals that could be doing the curbside pickup or attending the library.
Okay, thanks for that. And through the chair, I've got a couple more if you'd indulge me. I noticed that part of the provincial directives, one of them was dog parks, and I know our dog park is open, and it's been used frequently today. And do we have any protocols at the dog park in terms of the hard services on the gates, which is it would be a concern because people use the gates to get into the dog park. So hopefully people will use hand sanitizer, or I don't know if we're providing it or not, but that is a concern. I mean, the biggest supporter of the dog park in town, but I worry about that particular item.
Through the chair, that's a good question. And that was another question that was raised at our control group. There was a suggestion about sanitizer at the front gate. Unfortunately, if we put out 50 gallons would be gone within the first hour of the first day. So what the suggestion was is to ensure that there was proper signage at the entrance to it, to ensure that people are using the hand sanitizer, bringing it with them, or wipes or some form of cleaning cloths to make sure that we're not transmitting the virus any further.
Well, that's good. We need some kind of notification there. Also, there's been, I haven't, it's a communications piece because in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been asked, what about the parks? Can you have a picnic in the park? Can you not have a picnic in the park? And I'm like, my response had always been, it should be walk through. You should just walk through it. It's open space, walk through it. And so I think we're in a pseudo public forum here. So the question is, if I have 2 kids and my wife go down to the park, can we have a picnic in the park on a blanket?
At the current provincial regulations, there is nothing stipulating that you can't do that. Again, the gatherings are no more than 5, and certainly 5 within the household. So you can walk through the park, you can sit on the grass in the park. What we're trying to discourage and certainly comply with recommendations from the province. And again, there's certain things that are in place that are orders, and there's others that are recommendations. We strongly encourage people to maintain that no greater than 5 people. And again, the parks have been open for people to walk through or walk around or walk their dog. So that's never been an issue.
Okay, that's good to hear. And the other part of the, through the chair, I apologize, but I do have several questions here. Through the chair, I mean, the other directive that I heard the day ago or 2 days ago when we went into phase 1 in Ontario was individual activities, i.e. tennis. We have some basketball hoops in town. Can a kid go down and shoot some hoops on his own? Or because people are hearing stories in other municipalities, i.e. Ottawa, in the past, probably a month ago, where people are getting fined for kicking a soccer ball around or playing with their kids on their own. And I know that we are not I know there's discretion involved with our bylaw and our police, but I'm getting questions and people are not clear on what they can and can't do. So for individual activities, for an example, shooting basketball hoops at Lower Reach, is that allowed?
Through the chair, and excellent question. What the province has indicated is no team sport events. While basketball, football, soccer are considered team sports, that's not recognized as an acceptable use of the basketball court. Certainly, if there's kids that want to go down and shoot hoops, that's something that the recommendation I'm getting, the information I'm getting, that's not accepted simply because it's team sport. The province has recognized single-person sports such as tennis. So those activities that have the potential of 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids have been not permitted at this point in time.
1 kid. I'm talking about 1 kid.
I know, through the chair, I hear the question, but again, respectfully, we can only go by the guideline what the province says, and that's considered a team event. A basketball is considered a team event. Now, we have no problem. I can seek further clarification from our field advisor and report back. And on our next press release, we can incorporate a little more detail with regards to that type of activity.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Just one more comment. I mean, I think that, from a communications point of view, we need to be clear. Like the questions that I've asked are questions that our everyday people are asking. And, in my activities, today was a big day for me. I went shopping. It's Tuesday, so we go shopping on Tuesday. But, when I'm talking to people on the phone, people phone, they're not sure, and I always err on the side of caution, i.e., just walk through the park, and then the message is muddled. So hopefully we can get some clarity so everyone knows what exactly they should and shouldn't be doing, and that extends to masks too. I mean, today was shopping day, and the masks were in the minority. And I don't have one yet. I'm going to have one, but I think that the message has got to be clear. So, but thanks for their part.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to touch on the communications. Communications is never an easy topic to discuss, and certainly with surrounding jurisdictions such as Ottawa and other municipalities, all offering different ideas and different concepts. What we've tried to maintain is people accessing both the health unit recommendations, the recommendations from the province and orders from the province, and that's what we've tried to stand behind. And going forward, those items that you've raised tonight, we will incorporate those into the next media release, and hopefully along with any others that come forward within the next couple of days.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Councillor Allen, did you have some questions, comments?
No, I'm going to be giving an update in my report time about the library. And so that's where I was just going to jump into that, but I think I'd rather wait and do it with reports. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief, for the update. Can you just provide a bit of an update on the activities of bylaw enforcement as it relates to COVID? And I know both police services and bylaw have been responsible for enforcing the COVID order. Have we issued any tickets to date, any warnings? Are we still going to proceed with bylaw enforcement on the emergency order as things lessen? Sorry, I realize that's a couple of different questions.
Through the chair, we did increase the bylaw enforcement number of hours over the long weekend and the past weekend following the phase 1 release. To date, there has been a large number of reminders that have been issued both by bylaw and police, just because it is an extremely confusing time. And it's difficult for both enforcement agencies to determine whether a group of 6 is a family of 6 or it's 3 sets of neighbors all huddled together. But I can tell you that there has been a ticket issued with regards to an organized gathering that was issued by the police. But as far as the other ones, we're hoping that just the presence of the police and the presence of bylaw going around and providing additional information or direction. They started when on May the 9th of the landscaping and garden centers open, just to ensure that people are adhering to it. And they've also advised the operators of those businesses to ensure that the regulations are being followed and that they've got the proper signage up and they've got enough staff to ensure that that's happening throughout the businesses. But my understanding to this point, to answer your question, is I know of one ticket that has been issued.
Thank you, Chief. I suspected that, and I just wanted to highlight that, you know, despite the media rumors or media stories that had been circulated earlier in COVID around ticketing, most of those seem to be isolated to the city of Ottawa, and our more rural neighbors don't seem to be taking that hard and fast line. So if your kid's out playing basketball, as much as it's discouraged, you know, a parent doesn't have to feel concerned that they're going to get slapped with a $500 ticket. So, I mean, there's exercising discretion, and we want to encourage everybody to be safe and follow the order. But I think the fear mongering around bylaw tickets and violations therein is a little bit exaggerated at this point.
And through the chair, that's an excellent point. And like I say, our main focus in this whole process, as we're working through the pandemic and working through the various rules and regulations and acts, is to pass that on to the general public. It's a very, very confusing time right now with the various information coming in from 7 different angles. And you'll get far better compliance through education than you will with the enforcement right off the get-go. And certainly the police and bylaw have been doing an exceptional job with regards to that. And thankfully, and that goes towards how we've been able to contain this. So it's been a team approach, and it seems to be that the team is functioning on all cylinders.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, any more questions, comments for the Chief? Seeing none, thank you, Chief, for the update this week.
So next up, we have Jennifer.
Thank you. So just 3 quick items tonight. As you know, our strategic plan has a municipal cultural plan update in it. And earlier this year, we issued an RFQ, and CoW Communication was the successful proponent in that work. So COVID-19 is making that a little more challenging, but we are moving forward just a little slower than usual. Key stakeholders have been identified and will start to be contacted in the coming month, and council can expect to be contacted as well by CoW to get a better sense of the culture of Smiths Falls. So Speak Up Smiths Falls will also be used as a communication method, and we will push ahead on that project. Secondly, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank our business community for responding to our request to fill in a brief survey about their state of affairs. While it is obvious that our businesses are struggling with reductions in staff and revenue, most businesses, 82% in fact, anticipate that they will be able to reopen at some point. So that is the positive news. The survey results are going to be used to inform the work of the Mayor's Task Force for Economic Recovery, and Mayor Panko will speak to that later. And then finally, on the tourism front, we're trying to focus on keeping Smiths Falls top of mind to potential tourists and to reinforce to our own community all the wonderful things that you can see and do in Smiths Falls, even if it is through a screen. So we've posted our 2020 visitor guide, which was a beautiful document put together by Becky Allen. So it's now on our website for people to view. Also, as of about now, our Heritage Walking Tour is going to be posted on our website as well. So I would encourage people to check that out. And we're about to launch a promotional video about our Heritage Walking Tour as well, which will be a really nice thing. And you should see that in the coming week or so on our Facebook page and on Instagram. We've done a lot of work on Instagram to support our business and tourism communities. Thanks to Becky, we've had 9 Instagram takeovers from local community partners, and that's now been pivoted to having a Museum Tuesday live event on Instagram every week. So please check that out. It will include the Railway Museum, the Heritage House. It'll also have a tour of the mausoleum and the cemeteries. Lots of interesting things to see there. And then we're also pivoting the use of our On the Roll funds. That is a funding program where we offer the cultural community, mostly artists and musicians, some funds to perform in local venues. And now we're encouraging the use of Zoom and Instagram and Facebook to do those sorts of things to strengthen their content and to keep us all sane at home while this goes on. So that's my report for this evening.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. You know, I find it so refreshing being not only the first day of retail shopping, which I have missed greatly, although I'm sure my husband is happy that I have limited my online shopping in favor of shopping local now. But the initiatives that businesses are undertaking right now is just truly ingenious, and I can't say that enough. It doesn't matter if it's the small local business or the big chain, but I feel like everybody really needs to be given credit for adapting to this, and I think the tourism opportunities that our economic development department has taken on in the last couple of weeks is a reflection of that adaptation. And I really want to commend you guys, particularly Becky and Jennifer, for doing that, because I think it's not only building our presence now during COVID, but it's going to continue to build momentum once we open. And I think it's a great reflection of some creative thinking on staff. Jennifer, do you know what our viewerships have been on the Instagram and Facebook Live takeovers?
So
you're laughing. I feel like you knew this question was coming.
I didn't, but I like to tell the story. On Facebook, there was a post about our swans, which you'll hear more about shortly, and we had 11,000 views on that post alone. So we've got some really fun stories about things that are being watched. Instagram, what we're finding is our viewership in the exact live moment is not too high, but then people are watching it all day, and so that is pretty stellar. So we're pleased about that, and so it ranges on the topic, and I can report back on actual numbers another time for you.
No, I think that's fine, but maybe through the chair, do you have a sense of whether or not our viewership has increased during COVID? Like we're attracting more at different markets, something like that?
Yeah, it really has, and actually in the communications report that I did, I had the stats on that. You know, our website viewership went from a couple of thousand a month to 12,000, just as one example off the top of my head. Our Facebook followers have increased roughly 10%. Again, I don't have the number in front of me, but we've seen an increase on all media channels. And I think that speaks to not only our work on tourism, and thanks for the compliment, but also our work as a team to get the word out about COVID. We're seeing just an increase in everything that we're doing, and we're really trying to use all of our mediums to get the word out and to cover all the bases. So.
Thank you. And one last point, Jennifer, you raised the point about the communications report that you had forwarded to council. Is that something that we can make public, that we can add to the next council meeting just as an information piece, something like that? Because there was a lot of valuable input in it that it would be nice to broadcast more publicly.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Thank you.
Chris, you're mic'd or muted.
Is the, so is that report, we'll get that distributed or? What
Yes.
was okay,
Thank you.
great. Any further questions, comments? Being none, okay, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Okay, at this point, Mr. Chair, we can call upon Carrie for an update.
Thank you. I've got one very quick report tonight, and it's actually seeking membership on a couple of our committees. We're looking for membership on the Municipal Heritage Committee, the Airport Commission, as well as the Library Board. And a reminder too, I still have one opening on the Accessibility Advisory Board. I require one more citizen with a disability to sit on that committee. I currently have 4 applications in, and the terms of reference indicate 5. So if we have one more person step forward, we can bring forward those appointees at an upcoming meeting. For anybody who's interested, they can go to our website under the government tab and find the application, or just reach out to either Deputy Clerk Bennett or myself, and we will ensure they get an application.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks, Carrie. Can you just clarify on the accessibility committee? You mentioned that the member has to have a disability. Have we had a meeting of accessibility committee yet, or we still haven't made it to meeting membership? Okay, is there any leeway in taking anyone who's interested in joining the committee? I feel like if we're just that short in that one category, maybe we just open it up so that we can at least have a discussion.
I'm just going by memory. The membership of people with disabilities has to outnumber the citizen reps by provincial legislation. So currently the terms of reference indicate 2 citizen reps. So we have to have more of the reps with disability. So hoping outreach, we could get to 1 more person.
And to clarify, it does not have to be a visible disability. It could be someone who's dyslexic, like I am. Could be anybody.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Alford. You're muted.
No, I had something similar to the same question. Rather than hold up the work of this committee, is there a workaround in terms of, is there a minimum number of people that have to be on the committee provincially? Does it have to be 5? Can it be 4?
I'd have to check. It's been a while since I've read the legislation. As it stands right now, the way our terms of reference are worded, it's 2 citizen reps with 5 citizens with disabilities. But I do know that the provincial legislation denotes that the majority have to be those with disabilities. But I can certainly look into that, Councillor Alfred, and if there isn't a chance that we can move forward with maybe a minor amendment to the terms of reference, and that will be council's discretion.
Yeah, that would be my preferences. As the committee gets going, I'm sure that we'll have more participation, but I'd like to get it kicked off
Okay, I'll look
as quickly as possible. If that's the barrier, then let's find a way around it.
I'll look into that tomorrow and advise everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Mayor Panko, then Councillor Allen.
Yeah, one further thought on this topic would be, should we permit or encourage a caregiver or spouse of someone with a disability who could probably have a great perspective as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. Councillor Allen, did you?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing. My mother-in-law is blind, legally blind, and I know that her caregiver, a relative of ours who looks after her, would be a really good person on that committee because she's dealing with all the issues that go with being blind in terms of, you know, just making her life more comfortable and just able to do things for her. So I agree with what Mayor Panko was saying. I think that would help. And I also think there's an urgency to this. Like when we started it, it seems to me like it's months ago. I put my name forward and it just, we haven't been able to get people. Maybe that's why. But I do agree with Councillor Alford. I think that once we get it up and running and people see, you know, things are happening that are going to help others, it might be a way of getting people to get more interested.
Yeah, for sure. Councillor Alfred, did you have a follow-up?
I did. I'm sure there's a way that we can, and Mayor Panko's suggestion is a great one. No one is more in touch with that with some of the caregivers and what the challenges would be for someone with a disability. I'm sure we can figure some workaround here to get this committee off the ground, and I'll leave that in our Director of Corporate Services capable hands, but I'd like to see that soon.
All right, great discussion. Any further questions, comments on the committee recruitment? All right, thank you very much, Carrie.
Thank you.
Hey, next up we have Art to provide an update on community services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few quick pieces. We are with the spring weather here and 3 days of no snow. We are preparing our beds and our nodes for planting. We will be doing that next week. We reached out to Gemmels, who are providing the plants and plant materials for the DBA area, and they have been delayed slightly. So they're hoping to get things in for the first week of June. We are consulting with the DBA on that, in that we do have materials for the full length of Beckwith Street. But as it's not open at this point, we will be putting them in other locations around town, and we'll communicate that once we have a plan worked out with the DBA. We have opened up, as was mentioned earlier, we have opened up the tennis courts and the off-leash dog areas. I can confirm that there is signage there on appropriate use. And in the dog park, as an example, we've in consulting with public health, we determined a level of intensity in terms of the number of people that are allowed in there. So we've got that listed on there, and we're allowing 5 people on either side. We have taken out the furniture to prevent kind of a congregating point. So we're hoping to kind of get some good use there. I would remind people, we did have people today that were roller skating and biking on the tennis courts. That's not what the area is designed to do. So please use the designated areas for the designated activity, just so that we don't have any conflicts in the community. We did as part of public health mandate to test frontline workers. All of our staff at the CDC were tested last week. We've got reports back from the staff that all of them are negative at this point. We're still waiting confirmation from the health unit, but that's good news, so that everybody there is safe and healthy. As was mentioned earlier, the swans, we do have, they're in place, and by all accounts are enjoying the basin. They're much more quiet than the last group. They don't travel as much, which is our staff are very appreciative of. In terms of the naming, we got a tremendous response in Speak Up Smiths Falls. There were 75 submissions on names. I have the list of the committee that will review those submissions. I'll be in touch with them over the next day or so, so that they can go through the process of selecting the names and then doing up our announcement. And as Jennifer also indicated, when you're looking at all the things that are happening, one of the biggest hits that we've had in our media, over 11,000 hits, was related to swans.
Great, thanks, Art. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. Art, can you just clarify how often are CDC staff or any other frontline staff, I assume our police service is probably doing the same thing as is fire, but how often do they have to be tested for COVID? Or is it one test and then you don't need to be tested again?
The issue with testing is that, and this is more of a public health piece, but the issue with testing is you're positive or negative at that time. And so,
Yeah.
you know, you could go out and get contact again. One of the things that they wanted to do was to test frontline workers so that there was at least an indication that the environment was safe. And so they've done that. If this goes on longer, and we did pose that question at our emergency control group meeting last week, they may do more testing, but at this point, they wanted to get that first round done to ensure that the protocols that are in place at frontline services are being effective at reducing transmission or eliminating transmission.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Alford.
I forgot. I am looking forward to getting the call art to participate with Councillor Dwyer on the naming of the swans. Do we have an ETA on that?
You'll receive something tomorrow.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great. Councillor Allen?
Yeah, I just make a quick comment because I walk by there every day and I've been watching the swans. The fact that that Duck Island is sectioned off, I think, has been a big advantage to them settling. Like they seem very quiet and very happy there. And one of the people that was in the park when I was there yesterday said, you know, they're not scaring the geese because there were a few geese. And just at that, the male, you know, started yipping and going up and making big motion and scared the geese off the island. So everybody was like, oh, I guess he can do that. but such a positive feeling for our community. Every time I'm in the park going by, there are other people going by, just watching them. They're beautiful. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to their names.
Right. Councillor Dwyer.
I'll second Lorraine's comments. I too have been frequenting the beach area, not playing at the beach with small children. But the swans really have taken to Turtle Island or Duck Island, whichever one it is. I can never keep them straight. Is there any appetite to keep that area roped off for the rest of the season, even outside of COVID? Or maybe this is just too premature and pie in the sky thinking.
No, I think it's a great suggestion. I think initially we like to keep that area reasonably safe for them so that they can settle. I'm not sure if council recalls, but last year we put the swans in, and within a day they were chased off, and we spent 3 days chasing them through the swale. So the idea that they have a safe environment where they're comfortable, we've been feeding them there, so that's a good piece. We believe that we've got them in later than we should for mating purposes or nesting purposes at least, and that will contribute somewhat to their territory defending. But certainly we can look at creating a home base for them that is safe and visible, so that people can interact with them where it's safe.
Great, thanks, Art. Did we hear back from the Conservation Authority about their impact on the environment at Turtle Island?
They don't. The Conservation Authority doesn't. They sent a link to information on the swans. So they haven't offered an opinion at this point. We have consulted with people that are bird experts, and the idea that they are an introduced species is, is a factor. If we were looking to introduce a population of these birds, then that would be an issue. These birds are essentially our pets. We bring them to the farm and keep them warm and comfortable over the winter. Any progeny that comes out of this will be pinioned and dealt with in the same way. So we're not looking to introduce a population in the area. We're feeding them on the island as well and supplementing their food. So that's reducing their impact on the basin itself. But the basin size, from what we're understanding, is so large that two birds are going to have a negligible impact.
Great to hear. All right, any last questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Art.
Okay, so the fifth of 5 reports comes from Troy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few updates from Public Works this evening. The first announcement is we of course are moving forward with our leaf and yard waste collection this week. So that'll be Wednesday through Friday. Our messaging to residents or get your materials out for 7 a.m. on your collection day, which is of course the following day to your regular garbage and recycling pickup. And again, we're into our 3rd year now. We're encouraging people to use the brown compostable bags, which we're seeing broadly across the municipality. So a good change there. On the procurement front, we're moving forward with more and more activities as we progress through spring. We had 2 tender closings today that are for essential services that support wastewater and drainage. So we'll be bringing forward those tender results to council soon. We're also working on 2 key requests for proposals to go out before the end of May. One, we're working with the corporate services and the treasurer for the update to the water and wastewater master plan, or water and wastewater financial plan. That's an important study that we have to have completed in order to do a drinking water license renewal early in 2021. The other RFP that staff are working on right now was for phase 2 detailed design for Beckwith Street, which is a correspondence item on later in the agenda. And we intend on getting that out for bidding next week. On the street lighting end, council's familiar, we're doing a LED conversion program in the community. We received some fantastic news today. Originally, the Save on Energy program in Ontario was going to subsidize that conversion to the tune of $18,000, and we received news today that that has now increased to $52,000, so almost 30,000 plus more dollars. So good news today. And last update is for Beckwith Street, and we had some key milestones completed last week. On Thursday night, we did the last of the cutting and capping of the water main systems in Beckwith Street. So essentially all those old 1900s water mains are out of service and empty. Every business and property owner in that core area is now serviced by temporary water supplies. We're actually hearing some feedback from our customers that our water pressures are actually seen as going up in some cases. So there's a testament to some change. On the road closure front, you'll see that the east leg of Main Street is closed for the next 2 weeks, and that is to facilitate water and sewer extensions out that leg off of Beckwith Street. We sent notices out to the businesses and DBA on that last week. You'll also notice this week that a key activity for road excavation is advancing in the upper 2 blocks. And as a result of that, we are no longer able to maintain parking on the job site. So we did issue notices to that effect last week as well. On the financial end, we just did the progress payments for the month of April, and our spending on the contract with Tomlinson is now at 2.34 million. Financially, we're about 33% complete on spending on the overall contract, and our extras right now sit at about 57,000. So we're about 2.5% on contingencies. So again, very, very delighted to be in the 7th month of this project and still seeing our contingency use very low. And again, you'll see expenditures rise dramatically in the following months as we start to move into the surface work phase of the project, namely the road building. And that's my updates for tonight.
Great, thank you, Troy. Councillor Alfred, then Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Troy, for that. It's great news on all fronts, but I did have one question for you. Did we find any more super interesting stuff underground?
Through the chair, one interesting, didn't really find something recently, but I can tell you when they did the last of the cuttings and cappings on the old mains on Thursday night that we saw a very pronounced drop in our town's water production in the following days. That lends support that we've had some leaks in that stretch. Of course, in total, we've got almost 600 meters of water main that we are going to be decommissioning through this contract. And of course, replacing it with half that amount by moving towards a single system. So some great news that we're getting rid of some tired infrastructure and appear to be addressing some leaks at the same time. So that's the latest new news.
That's good news, and certainly Mr. Barlow will be happy about more water being accounted for now.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Director Dunlop. Just on that required financial plan for water, wastewater, are there, do you know, or can you share if are there some must-haves in that financial plan? For example, is there a range that we must recover on the costs versus tax supported, or are they asking you how will you pay for this infrastructure over the next 20 or 30 years?
Through the chair, great questions. The Ontario regulation is 453 that speaks to financial systems for water systems. In essence, we do not have to require full cost recovery on the system, but council does have to pass a resolution demonstrating that the utilities are adequately funded. As part of the regulation, we have to have a 6-year long, our financial plan has to be valid for 6 years. And of course, the former plan is going to be falling out of date very soon. So we do have to update that plan as part of a package of submission requirements to make to the ministry next spring. So when we do get a consultant selection, we will be providing a lot of oversight early on in the study to speak to what the regulations require and to further inform the public on our obligations under the regulation to ensure that those utilities are appropriately funded heading into the future. Again, one last point, that financial plan that is required under the regulation for the water system must be a standalone financial plan, meaning it cannot rely on other plans within the organization. It must speak to the system on its own.
It's a very interesting piece of information. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, last call for questions, comments. Okay, great news. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, that concludes item 5 on the agenda.
Great. So we will move on to 6A correspondence items. The first is a letter from Carolyn Mulrooney, the Minister of Transportation. She was writing to say that she's very pleased to advise us that we have been awarded $98,178 towards the detailed design for Beckwith Street Phase 2. This is 90%. This represents 90% of the cost of what it's going to take to get that job done, which is pretty standard for these connecting link grant projects from the province. So really good news coming from Toronto. Any questions, comments on that front? All right, so we'll move on to 6B. This is our annual report from the Integrity Commissioner. So under Section 223 of the Municipal Act, Tony Fleming from Cunningham, Swan, and Kingston is our municipality's Integrity Commissioner. Every year he sends us a report that summarizes what he's been up to. This year he had 3 requests for information from council, and he had two complaints. One complaint was investigated, reported, and no breach of the code was found, and the second complaint was resolved without an investigation. Obviously, there's a cost associated with this, and the cost associated with the advice provided was $257.92. The cost associated with the complaints was $6,625.88. The full report can be found on the town's website. Is there any questions and comments before we move on from this one? Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. One of the things that Mr. Fleming had included in his report was an offer to train council on codes of conduct and breach therein, as well as general municipal conduct for councillors. And I think it would be wise to take him up on that. I don't know if perhaps that's something that we could do by distance and take advantage to not paying him to drive all the way to our office and instead do it by Zoom conference, or alternatively, we put it off until the new year and then budget for it accordingly. I don't know why. Actually, I do know what Tony's daily rate is, but I assume it would be advantageous to take advantage of it now.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McKenna.
I think that's a great suggestion Councillor Dwyer's made. And if memory serves me, AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, may have webinars online courses as well. But I like the idea. It would be nice if we could do it together somehow and feed off of each other, because I think I could always use more information on how to be a better counselor and how to avoid some of the pitfalls that are out there. So I like that idea.
All right, any other questions, comments on that one? Councillor Alford.
Just one in terms of Councillor Dwyer's suggestion. Seeing as how we're going to be saving some money on conferences this year, maybe we can put that to training by Mr. Fleming or a webinar through AMO. We won't be spending money we don't have because we can't go anywhere because it's of the pandemic.
Great. I think it's a great idea. It's been a while since we had all of our orientation training, and I'd love a refresher too. And so I guess I'm seeing a consensus to look into some kind of integrity, to follow up on the letter and the offer by Mr. Fleming. CAO Morris.
Yeah, so we can set that up. Would the preference be to wait until we can have an in-person, or should we move ahead and do it virtually?
I'm seeing nodding heads. Is Councillor Alford?
Since at this point it seems pretty unclear as to when we'll be able to be in the same room with each other, I wouldn't delay it too long. I mean, who knows how long we'll be. We don't really know how long this is going to take. So I would be in favor of going ahead. It's better to do it in person, but this Zoom thing, I think we're all getting used to.
Okay. We will set it up. Thank you.
Great. So that moves us on to 8A priority issues, Settlers Square development approvals. Mr. Grenke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to bring to Council's attention a package of bylaws which, if passed, will administer the planning details for the Settlers Square residential development on Brockville Street across from the Settlers Ridge Mall. So Council will likely best know this development by its former name, Heritage Commons. It is a 110-unit housing complex in 3-phased buildings, all interconnected with some underground parking. The apartments will be rental, primarily geared towards seniors. In November 2019, staff brought forward a site plan for Council's preliminary approval, which was given in principle with staff support. The approval was contingent on the road closure and conveyance process for the part of the remaining portion of the municipally owned stub of the Allen Street Road Allowance. The developers were looking to acquire a piece of that road allowance in order to run the necessary sanitary connections to Marguerite Street. Well, at first they were only looking at a small strip of land for that purpose. What has happened since then is that engineering and site geology conditions revealed that additional land was required for the purpose, and the developers came back to the town looking to close and convey a greater part of the road allowance, something in the range of around 45 or 46 feet out of the 67-foot width. And recognizing this would no longer leave enough land in the unneeded road allowance in which potentially a residence or some other development can occur, the developers instead offered to incorporate an element of affordable housing within their development. And to that end, an agreement was worked out whereby the developer would create an additional 4 units within the north building that would be defined as affordable for a period of 20 years. This agreement is new to the best of my knowledge in Smith Falls. However, it has been used in other municipalities. The proposed road closure would allow for the conveyance of the land that's no longer deemed to be needed by the municipality. As part of the arrangement, 10 feet on either side of the road allowance would be conveyed to the neighbors on each side at the cost of the developer who's paying for the entire parcel and at no cost to the neighbors. We did work with our solicitor, Shane Kelford, on the appropriate transfer sequencing to avoid a municipal act question of bonusing for the neighbors, as well as avoiding the need for a consent process under the Planning Act, as municipalities are allowed to acquire and dispose of parcels of land outside of the consent. The road closure affordability agreement and site plan agreement are all related to each other and intended to be passed as a package, and now they're ready. This also allows us to bring back the site plan for final approval. So in November, Council considered the landscaping and design, which was reviewed and supported by staff and agencies, the key points of which are highlighted in the report from November, and this is substantially the same as then. So that report is appended to this. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of the developers on this file and their openness and flexibility to explore affordable housing components in what has become a complex but also extremely collaborative planning process. We feel the site plan and associated agreements will enable a development that's consistent with our planning policies, is appropriate in the community, and also helps advance the strategic priorities outlined in the strategic plan. I'd also like to acknowledge the assistance of Shane Kelford in guiding the agreed upon terms of the affordability agreement into an agreement which can maybe be used in the future. So for these reasons, we're recommending that Council pass the 3 bylaws authorizing the clerk and mayor to execute the appropriate agreements. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Carl. We've got Councillor Dwyer, then Alfred, then Mayor Penko.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl, for the report. I'm pleased to support this going forward. I was a little unclear based on the wording in your report. Were you looking for direction from council on the acceptance of 3 units over the original proposed 4, or that was just information for us?
Sorry, to clarify, we were looking for direction on approving the 3 bylaws. So, and what's being requested here is 4 additional units. So what was proposed previously is 106. Now they're looking for 110 by dividing 4 of the units into the larger 2-bedroom units into smaller 1-bedroom units. And they've the developers have confirmed that they'd be able to still maintain that the parking inside.
Okay, thank you. I just have one question with respect to the affordability agreement. In the case of tenant turnover of these units, is there a requirement for these units to come up for market rate assessment or reassessment at every turnover, or is it a fixed rate based on the original assessment plus the increase allowed for under the Tenancy Act?
The intent of the agreement through the chair is that the rate would be defined at the very beginning, and then that would be locked in over the course of the 20 years, regardless of the tenancy, of any changes to the tenancy, subject to the annual increases.
Okay, and I ask because obviously if it was up for reassessment every time a tenant moved, then the rate, the 80% market rate is going to increase steadily over that period. Whereas now these rates are going to be locked in for 20 years. I mean, in 20 years, we could have units that are, 30 to 40% of market rate. So I just wondered at the end of the day what that was going to look like.
Yeah,
all right. Carl, did you have a response to that, or we move on?
Oh, sorry. So I'm scrolling through the draft agreement here. So what I'm seeing here is so the developer agrees that during the term hereof, rent for each affordable rental unit shall be at 80% of the market rate for a one-bedroom apartment, market rate being determined by a qualified appraiser retained by J. Blackburn for financing purposes, and then agree that the rent for each affordable unit may be increased 12 months after a tenant first moves into the unit, or 12 months after the tenant's last rent increase, in accordance with the annual rent increase guideline as published by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Does that respond to your question, Councillor?
Yeah, it does. But it does lead to a follow-up question if the chair will allow it. And it's about the binding of this agreement to future landholders. So it's going to carry forward on title regardless of whether or not the property changes hands. Is that correct?
I'm just reviewing the exact provision. So that regardless of the property changes hands, so not just if the tenancy. So if J. Blackburn Construction were to sell the property, is that your question?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I have here the provision: no party may assign its rights under this agreement in whole or in part to any other person without the prior written consent of the remaining party.
Okay, does that answer it? CEO Morris?
Yeah, I've not looked at the agreement, but I expect there's a successor clause in the agreement. We can confirm that later if you want. But I expect it's
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Alford?
This has been an interesting experience for someone who's just new to the Planning Advisory Committee to see this get walked all the way through and now be at council. I will support staff's recommendation, and I applaud the efforts of staff and the Samur group in putting together what Carl has said is a complex arrangement and the first of its kind in Smith Falls. Mr. Samur's willingness to enter into construction of 110 new units that are very much needed is only eclipsed by him leading the way in terms of an affordability agreement for those 4 units. So that is hopefully going to set an example for future more inclusive development, and I applaud the Samur group for it, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Alfred. Mayor Penko?
I think Wendy said it well. This emerged out of Chris Samir's involvement with the Housing Task Force, and I think it was well articulated within that group about the needs of affordability, and Chris took the initiative to say he would like to include the affordable units with this development. So yeah, we certainly applaud him. It makes a big difference for people, and when 4 people are living there, obviously it'll make a big difference for them. So I support staff's recommendation for each of the 3 items.
Okay, great. Any further questions, comments on this one? Okay, great. Yeah, it's been really nice to see something move forward while everything else has been slowing down. So great work, Carl. Thank you. That brings us to 8B, COVID-19 update on potential financial impacts. Take it away, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here this evening to provide council with an update on the potential financial implications due to COVID-19. Staff have been monitoring this since the onset of the pandemic and provided a report to council on April 20th. And at that time, we indicated to council that we would commence with the budget monitoring process earlier than normal in order to quantify some of the significant variances. So as noted in my report, we're currently projecting an overall deficit of approximately 373,000, water deficit of about 41,000, wastewater deficit 64, and tax support at 268. So staff will continue to monitor and bring forward a monthly report to assess the financial implications. However, it's very difficult to accurately predict the full financial impact due to the unpredictability of when this crisis will end. In March, council approved 2 bylaws to provide some financial relief, one for waiving penalty on tax and utility bills, and the other for waiving parking fees. Further to this, there are other approaches that could be considered to provide further relief to the community, but will contribute to the projected deficit in the short-term cash flow. And those are denoted in my next report on the one being a potential decrease in the 2020 tax rates, and the other is a potential delay to the final tax installment due dates. So some other financial vulnerabilities that I wanted council to consider, they're not currently projected in this budget monitoring report. And those are potential loss of revenue for tax assessment at risk. If these were, it could be quite significant if these pending appeals are successful. And also potential loss of revenue from supplemental industrial taxes. As council's aware, we budgeted, which came in with risk, 500,000 for that. And we don't anticipate that to be finalized until the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year. So that will have some cash flow implications as well. Finally, I just wanted to reiterate to council, as per the Municipal Act, the town must balance year-end deficits either through draws from reserves or make up the shortfall in the next year's budget. So while balancing the budget through the use of reserves is a short-term strategy, it will come at the expense of the town's overall reserve health. And with that, I'll pause and answer any questions if you had any.
Great. Thank you, Janet. Any questions, comments on the report? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, just a question, Janet, and thanks for all your hard work. And I know the next report is going to be interesting, but we have you have a list in your report of capital projects we may or may not want to look at in terms of deferral. When are we going to? When's the rubber going to hit the road in terms of when are we going to have to start seriously talking about some of these items?
Well, some of them it's twofold. Some is cash flow implications. So some are going to be delayed potentially until the end of the year. And as we go forward and kind of monitor what the impact's going to be, we'll know more as each month goes by. We may well have to defer into future years. So we'll just have to gauge it, and we'll continue to gauge that as it's.
Yeah, through the chair, I want to thank you for that. And, you know, some of the items I think are easy and others are, you know, maybe a little more difficult, but, you know, as a group, I think we need to be realistic in terms of must-haves and nice-to-haves. So I know for one thing, the Lombard-Abbott intersection, that's being redeveloped now, as we all know. If that takes an extra year, I don't think that would be the end of the world, but I'm sure we'll have a discussion as a group about that.
So if I could just reiterate too that, and I think I spoke to this the last time, there's 11 million in our capital that unfortunately have already either been purchased or well on their way. So those, unfortunately, we won't be able to defer. So.
Just to add, which is massive. I mean, that's more than I've seen in my time around here. So $11 million in capital in 1 year is big, and that's a big chunk. So we're doing good.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. My screen froze up here, so if you were in the queue, I'd ask you just to put your hand up again. I've got Councillor McKenna next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Janet. Janet, I know you don't have a crystal ball. None of us do, and we can't see how far this is out. And you were looking at what you actually know have been reduced and some of the cost implications. I attended county council last week, and certainly on the community services committee, Lanark Lodge is running a deficit of $500,000 due to COVID. And they're anticipating that probably before every month or over budget at the lodge of about $200,000, that our share of that will come back in a very different share unless the province comes through. Now, to the credit of our provincial colleagues, they did send 120,000 forward to Lanark Lodge to help with offset some of that, but it's nowhere near the deficit that they're running. So there's a cost there as our share of that will be impacted. And I just want to alert council to keep our eye on those things. The other revenue source that I wonder about that I think is going to be under threat will be our share of the gas tax revenue. Again, as the price drops and as the consumption of gas has dropped, the revenues going into the feds have gone down, and that another area. And I know you're aware of this. We don't know what it will be yet, but this is much broader than just what we've got control over. So I just wanted to flag that with my colleagues, and that's why the reason we need to have, and I know you agree, regular updates, because it's a changing landscape quite rapidly. So thank you for this report. It's a good start. And like Councillor Brennan, I think we do need, sooner rather than later, start looking at what cost containment or what we can defer going forward to mitigate some of this risk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. We've got Councillor Alford, then Councillor Dwyer.
And I think my question is similar to both Councillor Brennan and Councillor McKenna's, but when are we going to have the discussion ahead of, rather than be reacting to it? I think we should council should consider what its list of projects and or services that we can either cut or defer in ahead of, we are now in June, almost in June. And we know that it's unlikely that we'll be recovered by the end of the year. So I would be open to having these discussions about what this council is prepared to do. And I'd rather have those discussions sooner than later. I think it's in our best interest to do so. Not tonight, though.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. Janet, I have a couple questions about the report. The biggest of which is on page 2, you talk about potential loss of revenue, particularly the tax assessment at risk. Do you see that as being any different than any prior year? Do you think that the vulnerability of homeowners during COVID increases our risk because they're more likely to appeal? Or is this kind of just the run-of-the-mill risk that we'd see every year?
Well, my report is sort of twofold. It's COVID related and non-COVID related. So they kind of, I just wanted to be aware where we had some other vulnerabilities and risks, and that is one area. So yes, right now we're projecting a deficit of 373,000, but I think we budgeted 250 for write-offs, 250,000. And again, it's an estimation. It has to be if appeals are successful. It's an estimate on what that potential loss be, and it's probably double that. Of course, you can't budget for that. That's a lot of taxpayers' dollars, held in that account. But it could have so I just wanted council to be aware that's another area that you could have a deficit potentially.
No,
no, these are from 2017 through 2020.
We have CAO Morris, then Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to supplement Janet's comment, the appeals that we're aware of now were in the bin before COVID-19, so I wouldn't call any of them extraordinary. What we don't know, of course, is what what types of appeals might be inspired or exacerbated by COVID, and we won't know those for some time.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Mel.
I've got a parade of monkeys coming by the door, so just in case you hear them. Thanks, that's helpful. The only other question I had, I think echoes what everybody else is saying. You know, when are we going to have the conversation about service levels, potential hiring freezes? I assume based on the report, given the date, that we have indeed already implemented a hiring freeze on summer students. I can't see us going through a hiring for summer students at this point. But I mean, whether or not that kind of opens up into a hiring freeze across the board, especially for some of our more seasonal employees in the fall, I feel like it's something that we should be doing sooner rather than later. However, the information that we're getting from the province changes day to day, if not hour by hour. So I mean, it's this catch-22, right? Like, do you put all your eggs in one basket and discuss it now, only to have a massive change in policy rollout and the emergency order, you know, at the end of the week? It's really, really hard. So I think, you know, given that we're not really talking about any service level changes at this point for the summer, I mean, I'd be comfortable kind of putting it off until kind of end of July, beginning of August, to allow ourselves some time to think about the impacts for the fall. But I think it's unreasonable or unrealistic to think that we're going to get service level changes, meaningful changes to the organization through the emergency order within the next, you know, 3-4 months.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. C.R. Morris.
Yeah, I think in terms of adjusting service levels, we have not made commitments for summer students at this point. We've purposely held that decision until June 1st to understand what our landscape looks like. So that's an area that clearly, if we don't have a safe, productive work site for the students, and there's little point in hiring them. I know that's not good news for students out there looking for summer employment, but we wanted to get a better reflection of where we are. And even though, you know, 360 some or 300 and some thousand is a big number, we believe at this point it's manageable. By far the biggest determinant of our financial health on a short-term cash flow basis is property tax payments and water bill payments. They eclipse anything else that we have. So that's what Janet is monitoring extremely closely. So as those due dates come in, we will have a better sense of what our cash flow position is. But I think many of the capital projects we've listed can wait. We can delay them in any event, but we will need direction from council on the bigger ones, like I mean, the library renovations. That's simply a contribution to a reserve, so you can hold off on that one. But Lombard Abbott obviously is the biggest cash flow. But bear in mind, even if we started that project later this fall, we wouldn't be spending the money likely till late this year, early next year. So we're also timing that with other work on that intersection, and clearly we're also wanting to integrate it with work on Beckwith. We would not choose to have Beckwith under construction and Lombard and Abbott under construction at the same time. So there may be some timing issues we need to look at as well. What I'm saying is that as time goes on, and time is measured in days and weeks, not months right now, in terms of our financial position, we'll have a better sense and can come back with more definitive recommendations on what we think you should defer or delay. Right now, we're just proposing what you should be thinking about. So the only other comment I would make about students is sometimes it pays to have a student, because if you know, our staff want to take vacations during the peak vacation season, and if we have to replace those staff at overtime rates, it's much more effective to have a student doing that work. So there may be some student positions that we would save money by going ahead with, but the vast majority would probably be deferred. So By our next meeting on June 1st, we'll have much more insight into where we think we should scale back right away.
Great, thank you, Malcolm. We've got Councillor McKenna, then Councillor Brennan.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thought that comes to mind is I want to give the Mayor's Task Force some time. Maybe we'll see a preliminary report and get some direction from them on the impact locally and what the business community is shaping up to look like. And I think that should really inform our work and our decisions going forward. The other is at County Council, again, our colleagues across Lanark County, the mayors and the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus are all talking about this very same thing. Every municipality is taking a look. I suggested, at least in Lanark County, and I know, Janet, you have regular meetings with your counterparts in the other lower tier municipalities, that we collect the data in the same format so that we can actually compare data, with the idea that if we go forward across the region in advocating to the province of the feds, that we've got data that we can share and speak much strongly rather than each of us going forward. The Wardens Caucus of Eastern Ontario has made it their #1 priority, regional economic development as a result of COVID. So I don't believe we have to do this all on our own. I think we can work with our county regional partners, the mayor's group. I think the Mayor's Task Force is going to be helpful in somehow keeping this all together in a timely way. And we won't have all the information, and we're going to have to make these decisions to the best of our ability. But I think we're up for it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I'm okay. It's not like it's an urgent thing that we have to decide what we're going to defer, but we've got to keep that on the radar. I know that, you know, AMO is advocating for, FCM rather is advocating for some substantial relief to municipalities, and the federal government has been forthcoming on a number of fronts, different sectors and small business and the rest of it. I don't think municipalities in the end are going to be left in the lurch, so to speak. Just depends on what level of support we're going to get. But you know, I somewhat agree with Councillor McKenna. You know, going forward, the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Group and as a group, Roma are a voice. We're not alone in the struggles that we're having, especially rurally in small towns in Ontario. Like there's 400 municipalities in Ontario, and we're all going through the same thing. And I think that as we go forward, I think we'll be fine. And the Mayor's Task Force, Mayor Panko will speak on that later probably. And you know, there's only so much as a municipality we can do individually to really make a real difference for businesses. That's got to come from the upper tier. There's no doubt about it. But we could be there and facilitate. And there may be some small things we can do, some things that will be helpful to them. But as we go forward, I think we're going to get through this. I mean, the town, as I said the other day, we had our meeting, is, you know, this town is on the rise, and that figuratively we are, and we've hit a bump here, but we're going to get through it. I have full confidence, and we're going to have help to do that. So, but we have to look realistically at some of these projects that Janet had listed. If not now, in the days to come, but I think we'll be fine in the end. But it's going to be tough.
You, Councillor Brennan. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, Jay covered many of the comments I wanted to make, but let's go back to Howard Allen's presentation and the fact that we're in good financial shape. And I think we're, at least from a timing perspective, we're prepared to deal with this. And there's still a lot of uncertainty, and that's what we don't know. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know how long it will impact our revenues, how long it will potentially increase our expenses. So we have to be fluid. We have to be prepared to adapt and change as time goes by. And I agree, there probably will be some support coming from federal provincial levels, and there are a lot of lobbying efforts going out now to ensure that happens. I have a Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus meeting on Friday, as well as the next Mayor's Task Force meeting. So there may be more to share at our next meeting. But yeah, I think we can sort of take it day by day for the moment, but we may have to make some hard decisions as we move into the fall.
Great, thank you, Mayor Benko. Any other questions, comments before we move on to the next one? Seeing nothing, so thank you for that one, Janet. Now we've got 2020 tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this evening I'm here to obtain council's direction for the 2020 tax rate bylaw. This bylaw is required every year following the budget approval in order to levy taxes. In my report, there were several options for council's consideration. So options 1 through 4. 1 and 2 are status quo as far as the tax rates, same as holding steady from 2019. Option 1 is the historical installment dates of June 30th and August 31st. Option 2 delays those by 1 month each to July 31st and September 30th. Option 3 was a suggestion by Councillor Brennan to decrease the residential tax rate by the 2020 average assessment increase of 0.92. And the historical due dates, and option 4 is the same as 3, but again, delaying it by 1 month. So just one thing I wanted to denote out of my report, if council were to approve a reduction in the residential tax rate, all other tax classification would decrease as per the ratios that were listed in the report. And the impact to the average residential bill will have a reduction of approximately $25 per month at this proposed rate or decrease, pardon me. So decreasing the tax rate will result in a loss of revenue of approximately $132,000. Just bear in mind this short-term decision would not only affect this year's taxation, but also have an impact in future years. Because as you know, MPACT is holding the line on 2021 assessments to the same as 2020. And also to note that if we delay the installment dates, that would have a direct impact on our cash flow as well. So with that, if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Janet. We'll start off with Councillor Alford.
No questions as usual, Janet. You've provided us with some very clear messaging in terms of what this all means. I will support option 1, which is the recommendation from staff. I think when we discussed this 2 weeks ago, that the intention was to see what if any more that we could help with. But the potential decrease of 0.92 to the residential tax rate, I know that roughly, and again, these are rough numbers, but say a third of our people of our community are running into some financial hardship, but 2/3 of them are not. And I don't know, I believe it was Councillor Dwyer mentioned the last time that a great many of these people would be renters. And so the tax, downing the tax rate.
Great, thank you, Councillor Alford. Do we have anyone else? Councillor Dwyer?
No, I think Jay's hand went up first. I'll hold until Jay speaks.
Okay. Sorry, it's freezing up here on me a little bit. Councillor Brennan.
No problem. No problem. You're doing good. Yeah, look, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and you know, and Janet has shared her report, which I appreciated, and also our communication before before I brought it up. And I think that you know, for as I said before, you know, we are in a good spot. We are in a good spot financially, and you know, it's not a lot of relief to people. There's retired people that live all around me, and you know, they're on fixed incomes, and so to save them a buck or two, and I think that we can handle it, and I know we can, and so I think is it symbolic? Maybe it's symbolic, but I think it's a gesture, and I think that people would appreciate that we know that you know, especially people with savings that are being, you know, whittled away beyond their control. So I would support the reduction of the 0.9, whatever it is, on the assessment, and just as a gesture that we know what that people are hurting, and yeah, everyone's hurting, and people that can afford it, well, you know, it's not a lot of money at the end of the day, and I think that the town can handle it, and we should do it. So that's my opinion. I don't know if it'll fly or not.
Chris, you're muted, but I assume you. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, thanks. So it's a really, really hard choice. And I mean, I think I'm a little misquoted, not that it's Woody's fault or anything, but I don't know for sure that it is 2/3 of people who are renters who need the funding, because I really don't know where the gap is. And I think that's the discussion that we had last week. I don't know if a tax relief program is really going to benefit those who need it the most, because we haven't seen anything to support that one way or the other. I don't doubt that this is a strenuous time on so many people. And I think that there is a need to do something. But I mean, the reality is, even if we defer payment by a couple months, as is identified in option 2, I don't know that that's really giving enough back to people, because it's just deferring a payment that they're going to have to make on top of all the other payments that they've been granted deferral of into the future. So I mean, I'm quite supportive of option 3, although it's reluctantly, because I see the hard financial decisions that we're going to have to make locally as well. But I would like to see, before we really conclude this discussion, I would like to hear from the mayor's task force, which was talking about financial relief and financial incentives across the community to balance that against this. And I thought we were going to have those two conversations dovetailed. So I'm reluctant to conclude this one until we see what greater good we can bring to the community in other avenues.
Right. So just to clarify, Nikki, you're thinking we should defer any decisions on this tonight, or you're going for option 3?
Well, I'll be honest. I suspect that council is going to outvote me anyways. But yeah, my suggestion would be to defer. If we're not, then I would be supportive of option 3.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Penko.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate where the motivation comes from, Jay, because we recognize that there are people in our community who are really struggling, and we had the results of the business survey, which really put a focus on that sector, and as you know, hurting deeply. My preference would be that any funds we're going to direct via COVID goes where it's needed the most, as Councillor Dwyer said, and I know in speaking with, as an example, some of our school principals, well, they understand where the families in need are in our community. They know where the kids are that regularly take advantage of the breakfast programs and may need help with lunch, and have not been getting that the last since before March break. And they are helping direct grocery cards to these families to ensure that the needs continue to get met. So that's one example. I know that if we wanted to direct it to the families that need it the most, we could probably leverage the insights and the experience of our educators who know where those families are. And the $130,000 is impactful on our overall budget. And my concern is we would end up directing money to people who are perfectly fine right now or not that impacted. And while $25 on the average residential assessment is something, it's pretty modest compared to the relief they're getting from other levels of government. And it leaves a bigger hole in our budget. And as Janet's indicated, that means every commercial taxpayer, multi-residential taxpayer, pipeline and industrial taxpayer also receives a break, and the break, their assessment would be far greater than what it would be at the residential tax rate. So we end up benefiting some of those who may not need it or need it the least. We're benefiting them in the biggest way by taking this action. So I would much, I know we need to get the installments out and get notification. Let's remember that we've basically given everybody a interest and penalty free break on the payment of taxes. So those that are having difficulty can defer that. We're not sure how long, but it could be a number of months. And that is costing the municipality and costing our taxpayers about $25,000 a month. So no, I support option one. I think at this stage, moving ahead with the status quo, and we will be having further discussions on what municipal dollars we can use to support those that have the greatest needs in our community.
Thank you, Mayor Benko. Councillor McKenna.
Just the mayor touched on the fact that every senior in our community is going to get at least $200 to mitigate the impacts, and some of them will get $300. And the child benefit tax has got a benefit for families with young children, again, to mitigate the impact. So those with much deeper pockets than our small municipality have stepped up and put money in to mitigate this. I'm at this point very comfortable with sticking with option one and the recommended option, knowing that we do have support from the upper tier, and they put money directly into people's pockets for this very reason. If some of our taxpayers are struggling, they've received some money. Is it ever enough? No, but I think we held the tax increase this year and we'll probably do that again next year. We've been doing that, and still, I don't want us to go backwards. I want to see us through, and so I'm sticking with option one.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. It's just a follow-up, and it really doesn't change the position I took earlier, but I'm struggling to understand where the greatest need really is. And I don't know that it's necessarily those that are already receiving other forms of assistance, i.e. the child tax benefit. My concern in speaking to a lot of friends and colleagues is that those that need it the most are the ones that perhaps you don't think actually do. You know, they're self-employed individuals who work in professions. However, they're not deemed to be essential professions and thus they're out of work. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. And my fear in making a decision around this is that we're going to put all our eggs in one basket, which is the mayor's task force. And I don't doubt that the motive there is genuine and really try to find where the most impact can be. But I also want to understand that before we write this off in totality. So even if it's an option to bring back something else as far as a universal tax relief, as part of that discussion, something like that, because I mean, as much as it's helpful to go to educators and say, you know, which families do you know that are in need? Perhaps those families are the ones that are already benefiting from the multiple levels of funding coming down through the province and the feds. I don't know. But my gut instinct is that it's this missing middle of the economy that's really hurting the most, and no one's really talking about it. And perhaps that's where we can focus our efforts. Or perhaps it's not. Maybe we just decide that we're going to not talk about a universal type of benefit for the community and decide to focus on, you know, economic relief. I don't know, because we really haven't been provided with fulsome information to have that discussion or make an informed decision.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. I agree that I'd like to see more information, and I'm really excited to see some of the products that are going to come out of the Mayor's Task Force. I agree 100% with you that I don't know who needs the help right now. I know that there's a lot of places where it might not be expected, and it makes sense because they've been slipping through the cracks, because it's the obvious places are easy to cover. I know that myself, and I think everybody that's in this meeting right now likely does not need assistance. I know that as I'm blessed with a steady job, I've got dependable income coming in. I feel a duty to pay my taxes, and that might sound silly, but it's like I'm on the monthly payment plan. So maybe somebody like me should be looking at doing the two installments instead of doing the monthly to help with the cash flows. That being said, because this would put $25 in my pocket, say on average, but it's going to put our deficit up by 30%. I just don't see the real case for option one. But I do think I'm really glad we went through this exercise. I think it's great, the information that Janet's compiled. Councillor Brennan, I think like it's a really great spot where where your head's at, but I just don't see that this is the most strategic way to spend $132,000. So I also agree with option one. Councillor Alford, you
Well, just working closely with the DBA and all the programs and Councillor Dwyer is right. You don't know where all the gaps are, but there are, and I don't know how much you know about the programs that have been coming down from federal and provincial levels, and that word is going out. Economic development is helping a lot of small business or self-employed people, as are the DBA, as are the chamber. So there is money flowing down to those middle people who are in trouble too, particularly self-employed people of small businesses. So there are some programs and monies that can be accessed. Maybe not everybody qualifies for it. I don't know all the details. Certainly the DBA would, because they're pushing out that information to those people all the time. So just as by way of, because I'm following it all the time. So, and I know you're working and have two little kids. So there is a lot of people like the Chamber, our Economic Development Department, and the DBA who are working to help those people that I think you're referring to.
Councillor Dwyer?
Yeah, working and having two little kids hasn't slowed down my ability to seek information. Since we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, it is something that I've started to pay more attention to. But that said, I mean, the information changes daily, and it's very much situation dependent. And I think before we have this discussion in a meaningful way, I'd like to see something from staff come forward that clearly articulates where the missing metal is.
I agree with that sentiment. Is there any other questions and comments on this? Councillor McKenna? Councillor, sorry.
I thought the discussion we just had was very meaningful, Mr. Chair, and the information is what we have. There isn't some magic pot of information that the staff are going to be able to pull up and say there's a huge gap here or a huge gap there. This is what it is. It's we're making these decisions, and I think the municipality, the staff need to know from us if we're leaving the rates the way they are and doing the recommendations. We can't defer this conversation. We're into June, as has been pointed out, very soon. We need to, we've had the discussion. It's been very meaningful from my point of view, and I think there isn't a lot more information. We're going to be having to revisit decisions as the year goes on, and Janet's going to provide us with that regular data, but there isn't some pot out there there's some knowledge out there that we don't have. It's where everyone's doing the best they can with what we have right now.
Janet, did you want to respond to that?
Just to Councillor Dwyer's request, Stats Canada, unfortunately, the most up-to-date information is from 2016. So I did go there to look at sort of where all the population lies and so on. But to use that data now, I mean, our world has changed so much in the last few days. So we didn't really put a lot of emphasis on outdated information, unfortunately.
Thanks, Janet. Councillor Allen, you had...
Yeah, I'm going to go with option one as well for the reasons my colleagues have said, but I also agree, like Mayor Panko, that it's very difficult to help the people through taxation that really need our help. And I think our community is coming together with food and some of those things, but I'm hoping that the mayor's task force is going to look at a lot of those social issues right now, that this is causing, you know, real upset for many families. I don't think that, I don't want to go backwards. I think that the people who, over the years when how many years now that we've been together, some of us, we've come a long way in decreasing our debt. And I think that the option one is going to help us to stay on that track. I don't think that we're going to have a lot of other places that we have to put the money because of this pandemic. And I just think that we should keep that status quo as it is.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a consensus around option, or a majority around option one. Any final comments before we move on? All right, thank you very much, Janet, for preparing these reports tonight. So our next item of business is 8D, closed waste disposal site inspection report. Director Dunlop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report before committee is provided for information to provide details on an inspection performed by the Ministry of Environment on January 6th. The property known as the joint landfill. Within the report, you're going to see some background there. In 1970, the town leased privately owned land in Lot 3, Concession 3 in Elmsley Township for the purposes of a municipal landfill operation. They did receive approval from the province for landfill in December of 1970. The site was previously used as a sand and gravel operation. If you look in your report, you'll see in attachment 1 the location of the subject waste disposal site. It's behind the Bethel Pentecostal Church on Brockville Street. It's actually located in Rideau Lakes Township. Over the period of 1970 through 77, the town applied for and received numerous extensions to operate a landfill at that location. Our records indicate that in November of 1977, that landfill was closed and capped and ceased to operate at that point. We received an update this year. Of course, the ministry did an inspection of that property on January the 6th. They followed up with a report that is attached to tonight's agenda, dated February 25th. You'll see in that attached report that there's 4 key actions that are being requested of the town as the former operator. It is important to note that we hold all environmental responsibilities for that landfill operation, despite not being the active property owner. We did operate that landfill under a lease under a lease agreement with the landowner of the day. So the 4 key action items that have been asked of us is to commit to a spring and fall inspection program. And the specific things the ministry wants us to look at are evidence of leachate springs or ponding. Item 2, if we do observe any of those negative impacts, we are to report those to the Kingston office of the MOE. The third item is to ensure that the integrity of the site cover is maintained. Of course, keeping a landfill cover well and secure is a key part of preserving and protecting the hydrology beneath. And item 4 is essentially a summary that we are to keep a record of all these annual inspections going forward. In essence, when did they happen? Who carried them out? What were the observations and what was reported to the ministry? A few actions I'd like to report this evening that staff have taken in light of this report. Of course, this kind of came into our hands right before the pandemic. So we did reach out to the ministry, asked for a bit of relief, and they granted us some time to go through the assessment. So we did quite a bit of review on the file. Again, we're talking about a 1970s operation, so there's a lot of reading to do by staff. We carried on through that till about mid-April. We also reached out to the current property owner to talk about the report that we had filed. We also made arrangements regarding site access to do the things we need to do. On April the 6th, we hired Blue Metric Environmental to assist us in this clearing the inspection from the ministry. The key reason we selected the Blue Metric was because they had familiarity with the hydrology of the area. They were familiar with the site, and they were also actively serving the town as an advisor on our Lower Reach landfill site. So on April 16th, Blue Metric carried out a spring inspection. Very pleased to report that there was no negative observations in the site. We did observe some illegal dumping. There's some old tires, metal, etc. We will be under obligation to clean that up. Blue Metric did prepare a report and forward it to the Kingston office. And once we hear back from the ministry on the review, we will report those findings back to council. In terms of financial implications, it's important to note that all the work that we had done by Blue Metric to review the file and to have a hydrologist inspect the site and prepare a report summary to the ministry puts us about $3,200 plus HST. Very pleased to at least report that those costs will be covered within the operating budget for 2020 under professional services. But the important takeaway here is this is going to be a new cost for the organization going forward, starting in 2021. So something we will have to include in our budget. So again, because of our environmental liabilities, it was important we brought this report forward to council so that they were aware of the former operation, what our responsibilities are, and what they are going forward under the Environmental Protection Act. So that's my summary of the report for this evening.
Great, thank you, Troy. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. Troy, what precipitated the communications from the ministry? Because this site has been there for quite some time, not heavily monitored. Was there something that brought this on all of a sudden?
Through the chair, it's a great question. When you do read the ministry's inspection, they don't identify why they came to arrive at the site. I can tell you that in my past work experience with Mississippi Mills, I know the ministry has in recent years looked and revisited older landfill operations to make sure that the closures are, we'll say, in the state of affairs as they were supposed to be when they were closed. They want to make sure new environmental liabilities aren't arising, but I would be remiss to say what prompted their current inspection, but that has not been disclosed to us. So it was very much a bit of a surprise.
Fair enough. That seems to be the way the ministry works. Yeah, thanks for the information. I mean, it's good to know. And hopefully the benefit that comes out of this is that we get a cleaner environment because of it.
Councillor Alfred.
Just well done, Troy, to try and dig out 50 years, nearly 50 years of information and have it all in one place. Someone in the future will thank you for doing that. And it was, I had not thought about Percy Joint in quite some time. He was an old friend, so it was nice to see his name again.
Thank you.
Councillor Penna.
Director Dunlop, is that, do you know if that twice a year inspection is a staff preference or is it regulated? Or we went 50 years without a review and it looks pretty good. I was thinking maybe every 3 years, or is that something that we can push back on? Or is it, if it's regulated, I understand it, but if it's just the regional office, that's what they like to do now. Do we have a sense of that?
Through the chair, I think the ministry's report is quite lenient. They're just looking for a regular check-in on the landfill. Obviously, their intentions are, as Councillor Dwyer identified, about protecting the environment. There could be more substantial outcomes that could be more expensive to municipality. I know again, from my past work experience that I've come from other municipalities where we had regular hydrological testing of wells in the perimeter, and that gets costly year over year over year, often limited change in what the results you're seeing. So I think in light of what we're being requested, it's probably good news, a visual inspection and all the evidence to date that we see on the file, and certainly that we're hearing in the review by Blue Metric, is the site's doing what it's supposed to do post-closure. And again, we're proactively going to go in there and clean up the debris that's on the site and working with the landlord to make sure that doesn't recur. We do not think it was sourced to the site. We think somebody got in there and did some dumping, but there's no evidence that it was done in recent years. There's old materials that were dumped.
I understand and appreciate your response. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any further questions, comments? All right, thank you very much, Troy. We'll see you in a week.
Mr. Chair.
So we will move on to 8E, appointment of weed inspector, Director Costello.
Thank you. This shouldn't take too long. It's a housekeeping item. As per the Weed Control Act, the town of Smith Falls must have a weed inspector appointed. As of as of the beginning of May, I think it was, we had a letter from Mr. Ken Gilpin, who has been our weed inspector for a number of years, advise us that he will be retiring. To that end, the County of Lanark has a staff member who is trained, Mr. Darren Umpherson, who is also appointed by the county at last week's county council meeting. As a note, I'm going to say 23 years here, I don't think we've ever had to call upon the services of the weed inspector, and I hope I didn't just jinx that. But it's staff's recommendation that we pass a bylaw to appoint him as the town of Smith Falls weed inspector. If council goes this route, there's currently no cost for this service. The county will provide it to the town free of charge. However, this will be reassessed in a year if there has been any expenses incurred.
Great news. Thank you, Carrie. Any questions, comments? All good to go? Record report. Thank you. We can move on. 8F, we've got the noise bylaw report.
Thank you. This is an update to our current noise bylaw. I have to say, after doing some research, our current noise bylaw, which isn't so current, it was dated 1973. It has served us well for a number of years. There are quite a few provisions that you'll see duplicated in the draft bylaw that is before you. The updates in this bylaw, we've actually have a definition section now. As well, we've included set fines. Our current bylaw was by fine by the Smith Falls Police. This bylaw will add a set fine so that our bylaw enforcement officers as well as police can enforce it with an actual fine, the same as we do with our parking bylaw. So there's provisions within this bylaw regarding music, horns, construction, what else is there? Grading, grinding, rattling. We've also added a provision that mimics our property standards bylaw for certain things on houses that may make noise if they're malfunctioning. And we also have exclusions in the bylaw that we've put in for fireworks that are authorized by the municipality, races authorized by the municipality, of course, emergency vehicles, parades that are authorized by the municipality. They're all listed in section 3 of the bylaw. So if council concurs, we'd like to bring a bylaw forward to adopt a new noise bylaw for the town of Smith Falls.
All right, thank you, Director Costello. We have Councillor Dwyer, then Councillor Brennan.
All I can say is about time. Thank God. I'm going to miss having a reference to gramophones in the new noise bylaw. I feel like we should add that back in just for nostalgia.
I agree. It was hard getting rid of that word.
Yeah. Carrie, I've got a couple questions.
Certainly.
One is, can you explain what the difference was in the exemptions between section 3.1.17 and 3.1.18. I couldn't quite figure out what the difference was.
Yes, absolutely. This was one that Director Dunlop and Chief McGilvery and I discussed last week. The difference between the section is one is for basic construction, so that would be but your construction companies. So this last section, 3.1.18, is for work done by the municipality or approved by the municipality, and that would take into consideration things like Beckwith Street, where sometimes they have to do things after hours. So that's the difference between those two provisions.
Okay, that's helpful. That's very helpful, because one of the other comments I had was that a construction start at 6 a.m. seems crazy, particularly given that there's no time of reference to days during the week. So when I read the bylaw, it sounds like we're permitting construction to start as early as 6 p.m. on any residential property in town any day of the week. Is that a clear take on how this was written?
So that section of the bylaw mimics the current bylaw that we have from 1973. So noise arising between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. would be from any construction work that takes place within the municipality. 260 Brockville Street, for example, or any construction. The last provision would be only work that's done by the municipality, and that would take into consideration after 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. So if they had to do work on a main on Beckwith Street for an emergency repair, that would be permitted. So that's a direct takeaway from our previous bylaw, the 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. time provision.
Okay, that's fine then. If it's consistent, then I won't argue that. 6 a.m. just sounds kind of ludicrous on a Sunday morning. And if my neighbor started a construction project at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, I think I'd be pretty upset. I would be more comfortable with restrictions than all out prohibitions. And I noticed in reading the bylaw that a lot of the provisions are going to apply uniformly. So say you have a contractor working on your property like I did today, who's playing music that's audible outside because his project's outside, suddenly he's in violation of the noise bylaw. But that isn't necessarily something that's disruptive, unusual, that type of thing. And I get that there's a fair amount of discretion to the enforcement officer as to what constitutes disturbing the peace, which doesn't have a definition. So I guess my question is twofold. Have you considered whether or not we should be placing some parameters around what is acceptable during daytime versus nighttime? Or two, adding a definition about what disrupting the peace actually constitutes? And I can see why you want to leave it as flexible as possible to allow the officer discretion.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's proved difficult to find definitions of nuisance and things of that nature because it is discretionary. So you kind of have hit the nail on the head. And I can say for the most part, through the years with the police enforcing this bylaw, there is quite a bit of discretion used when enforcing. But that is certainly something, if council wishes, I can go take another stab at it and see if we can put maybe some further restrictions on things like that. Are you looking for more simply during the nighttime or daytime, Councillor Dwyer, for those things?
When I read the bylaw, it seemed too restrictive for general daytime activities. Okay. But that was just my sense, having worked with some of these bylaws before. The only other piece that I wanted to clarify was, did the original bylaw speak to fireworks? I thought it was unusual to have a fireworks reference in this bylaw, since most municipalities have their own standalone fireworks policies.
No, the previous bylaw did not, to my recollection. That is a new provision. The bylaw we have in place for fireworks is only for the sale of consumer fireworks, and I don't think there is a provision in there. So that is a new provision in our bylaw.
Okay. My sense is that perhaps we should look at including it in a fireworks specific policy. But again, I leave that up for debate and discussion by council. It's just great to see a new bylaw coming forward. And if we can toss gramophones back in, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I'll support this. That was my question, fireworks, because this year is going to be I don't know what's going to happen in July, and I know when I first got elected, I had the question, can I have fireworks in my house? And I could. So I think we need to be clear with people of what they can and can't do, as I was talking about earlier. And I think that this year, come Canada Day, people are going to want to have some sort of outlet, and they may not have the usual type of outlet. So in the bylaw, and I just quickly read it over again, is it permissible to have fireworks in the municipality?
That would be a question for Chief Cheeseborough. I know we have a bylaw to regulate the sale of consumer fireworks, but I can't answer that, Councillor Brennan, off the top of my head without.
Yeah, it would be good to know. I mean, you can go to Canadian Tire and buy them, and corner stores and whatnot. So, and I've done that in the past, and I'm admitting it right now that I've had fireworks here.
I can look that up and send that out in the morning.
That would be good to get out publicly.
Great. Councillor Alfred?
Just a quick one, Carrie. Are these set fines, are they comparable to other municipalities? Did you do some comparisons?
I did. I always do research with other municipalities because I know if they're not within a certain limit that the Ontario Court of Justice won't support them. So I did do some research with 2 or 3 other municipalities. I couldn't find very many that do offer set fines, Councillor Alfred, but the ones I did were right in line with their set fine provisions.
Okay, well, I more than support any updating of any bylaw that's 47 years old. Let's, we got some more of those because I'd like to see them too. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may, there is no urgency. I know Councillor Dwyer wants to see the bylaw come forward, but I'm happy to see if I can find some provisions about a definition of disturbing the peace, as well as maybe some time frames, and we can bring it to the next council meeting. It's not imperative that it goes this evening.
Okay, we've got Councillor Allen and Mayor Panko up.
You know, I agree with my colleagues. I mean, this has been something we've needed for a long time, and I really like it. I think it's great. On Maple Avenue, pigeons are our biggest noisemaker, and I didn't see them mentioned. But thank you for the sharing.
Great. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, no, I think just has been stated, long overdue. Much appreciate the hard and extensive work, Director Costello, and looking forward to giving people the opportunity to enjoy their property more without interruption and disturbance.
All right. So, is there any reason not to get a little more clarification on the disturbing the peace side of it and have it come forward at a future council meeting? All right. Great. Thank you very much, Carrie.
Thank you.
Good work. Jay, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we're Court 8. I'm going to propose the committee. We defer the final 2 items to the next meeting, and then we'll proceed to our council meeting.
Great. Any discussion? Councillor Dwyer.
I'll second that suggestion as it reiterates my point at the beginning of the evening.
CAO Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just point out that none of the items on the council agenda are time sensitive. And 3 of the items relate to the development for Blackburn. And we had an outstanding question to answer on that one. So related to the successor rights of the agreement. So one suggestion that you might want to consider is to continue the committee meeting or go as far as you want and then recess until next week on committee and hold the council meeting next week. But I'll defer to council. That's a suggestion.
Councillor McKenna.
I'd like to finish our agenda and defer the council meeting until next week.
Okay, so we, Councillor Alford, and then Councillor Dwyer. You're muted, Wendy.
Sorry. I do think we need to revisit maybe possibly returning to a weekly meeting, council and then committee of the whole the next, because we are running into these late evenings quite often. I would be certainly open to moving the council meeting to next week. I do think, much as I had suggested we defer the service sustainability report, and I always hate to have staff wait around all this time only to be told that their item has been deferred. I would like to go on with the Victoria Park relocation report. I'd like to finish this agenda and move council to next week.
All right, Councillor Dwyer.
Sorry, just to go back to CEO Morris's point earlier, CEO, it was not my intention to defer moving ahead with the Blackburn discussions tonight. If it's ready to go, then I would like to vote on that tonight or next week if that's what ends up happening. The question I had was more just an information follow-up after the fact. I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on voting.
Okay, so we've got, it's on the table to adjourn the committee, the whole meeting, and move on to council to continue with the agenda, or go with the Victoria Park and move on. Mayor Franco and Councillor Allen have comments. So
Okay, yeah, the Blackburn item, if it was a sense of urgency, I'd be fine moving into council to deal with that. If a week's not gonna make a difference, then I'm fine scheduling council for next week. As Councillor McKenna suggested, just completing tonight's CoW agenda and then having a council for next week.
all right, Councillor Allen.
Oh, so did you, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would like to finish the committee of whole and defer this. And I like the idea of having weekly meetings. I find this is late, and by the time you get to 8 or 8:30, you're not probably thinking as well as you should be.
Okay, so I see a majority in favor of continuing the agenda. Councillor Alford.
Just one request, Mr. Chair, is if we could have like a 5-minute, because we're going to be, we haven't stood up in nearly 3 hours. So could we have a 5-minute break and then resume the CoW?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Anybody against taking a quick break? Okay, how about Zoom at 7:55? Is everybody's sound and video working? Great. Okay, CAO Morris.
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chair. So, is everyone back? Councillor McKenna? Anyway, during the recess, we had a chat with the developer, and naturally he would like the approvals to go ahead so we can start to take the project to the next phase. So if everyone's comfortable with the recommendations as presented, then I would suggest that could go to council this evening, and you can decide whether you want to do the whole council meeting or just those 3 items, but those 3 I would consider a priority.
Okay, so based on the information from the developer, I think, and with the housing situation that we have in Smith Falls, that's definitely a priority. How are other people feeling with adjourning early and moving to council? Issues? Okay, so motion to adjourn. Councillor Al, want to make a comment, or were you?
Sorry, you were breaking up, Councillor McGuire. Could you say that again?
So my understanding is that the getting the Brockville Street approvals moved through tonight is the priority. So based on that, is everybody okay with adjourning this meeting early and moving to council? Right now, is there any discussion on that, or can we get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Brown?
Councillor McKenna's frozen.
Yeah, the quality deteriorates.
Okay.
Councillor McKenna?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You just can't see
Yep.
you.
You can hear me. Okay, I don't care what I look like. This is the 3rd time we've tried to get this thing stopped about being talked about tonight, and I don't understand why we can't talk about this. It's disappointing. We spent a lot of time on some very light items, and this is an important item we want to keep the conversation going on. But it looks like we have to get to a council meeting and approve the Brockville Street, which I'm very supportive of. So I'm not going to object any further to Councillor Brennan's desire not to talk about it.
All right, Councillor Dwyer?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, perhaps the CAO can offer insight. Is there concern about a 1-week delay or a 2-week delay about either of these topics?
Well, you're referring to the 2 committee of the whole items?
Yeah, sorry, my bad. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't think a 1-week delay would throw either of them off course. I'd just like to remind you, we do have a September deadline for the Victoria Park campground, so I would not be supportive of delaying it past a week.
That's fine. Noted.
Great. All right, Councillor Brennan, then Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I don't have a desire not to talk about it. I would like to talk about it after people digest the report. And I think I can have a more fulsome discussion at that point. And it is an important topic. And, 3 hours into a meeting and without really be able to talk to other people about it and to come back with some sort of a informed opinion of what the constituents want, I think a week delay is warranted on the Victoria Park. On the report from Director Manhire, it's a lengthy report, and I think that needs a fulsome discussion as well. And I don't see that as being time sensitive. I understand that we have a deadline in September. We're in late May, And this has been going on for months and months and months. So 1 week is not a big deal. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. I certainly do want to talk about it. And I have things that I would like to say about it, but I'd like to have an informative discussion at that point. So not that I don't
Thanks,
want to talk
Councillor
about it, believe me.
Councillor Alford, and then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, just do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly moving along the housing situation, I will go along with deferring the discussion on Victoria Park, except to make the comment that in another week, after everybody has digested this, who needs to, I have great concerns about the report and what the questions are that we are asking here. And so as the report reads, it's about one thing, and I really think we need to have a fulsome discussion about something before we have that one. But we'll get to that when we get to that next week. A motion to adjourn.
All right, seconder, Councillor Allen. All those in favor? All right, carries. We will adjourn this meeting of the CoW until next Monday. Moving into council, Mayor Penko.
Yeah, just we'll pause for a moment before we come back to council. I need to know who is moving and seconding each of the 3 bylaws. So I've got the agenda in front of me, but
Mayor Panko, if I might just interrupt, I'm just thinking, because the agenda, is council going to go through the whole council agenda, or you're just passing those 3 bylaws? Just the 3 bylaws? So I'm wondering if we could just rejig the numbering that you have on your expanded agenda. First bylaw would be 7.2. That bylaw number will now be 10146-2020.
I'm hoping you can bring that up to me from downstairs.
Oh, there's a copy on your seat, but I'll bring it up.
Oh, okay. I'll look around here. The lights are off. Okay. And let's just pause for a moment, please. So we'll be back in 2.
Anybody have any good jokes, stories, news updates? Peter, you got a baby.
Yes.
Congratulations.
What's the baby's name?
Samuel was born in this house about 12 days ago.
Nice.
Wonderful midwives, a little baby boy, and this 2 older brother. Their family of it's almost 3 months they've been with us now, and which is great. But
He's still there.
You know,
he's still there.
They're all here.
Yeah.
Kids. Yeah, no, he's not still in the room with me. I tried to.
Very quiet. He's very quiet.
He's a good sleeper and eater. He's a lovely little boy.
Congratulations, Peter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
He has brothers? Peter, he has brothers?
He has a brother, yeah. He's 2-year-old.
Ah, nice.
And he's there. And he's there.
They're all here.
They're all there. And my grandson Otis will turn 6 on Saturday. It's coming Saturday.
Are you doing a Zoom birthday party?
I will probably be parked in the driveway behind a couple of hockey sticks, because that's how they indicate to the kids that grandma can't get any closer. All I need is a haircut and a couple. All I need is a haircut and some hugs from my grandkids, and I'll be able to survive this pandemic.
I have a colleague who's seriously contemplating having her hair cut by a dog groomer. It's desperate times.
A dog groomer?
Well,
yeah, because the dog groomer's open.
Okay.
I'm not gonna get my haircut.
We're all
I'm gonna
gonna
look
be
like
hippies
Mike
again by the time this is over.
We need all the ponytails before we're done here. Okay, everybody. Let's get this wrapped up. So I'd like to welcome everyone.
Sorry, before you start, do you have those new bylaw numbers?
I do. So 7.2 is now 4.6. and then 4.7, 4.8.
So I got 4.6. Okay.
Jay, who's your seconder?
Nikki.
I am.
And Nikki, you're number two.
Yeah.
Who's your seconder?
Christopher.
And Wendy, who seconded your bylaw?
McKenna.
Okay.
And that will be mine will be 101.
4.8.
4.8.
4.8. 4.8.
Okay.
Everybody ready? We will do our best.
Go.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to this regular meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Tuesday, May 19th. Of course, it's our virtual meeting. We have everybody in attendance this evening. I'm going to be some amendments to the agenda. We were deleting bylaw 7.1, our confirmation of proceedings bylaw. We're also deleting all the item 7.5, 7.6, as well as item 8.1. So we're proceeding only with item 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4, dealing with the construction on Brockville Street. So I will, I assume that, well, no delegations, no adoption of minutes, unless for disclosure of monetary interest. We should cover that. There is none. We have no adoption of minutes, and I'll assume we have no reports. We'll leave reports for next week, please, everybody. So our first bylaw is with Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with J. Blackburn Construction, CO Samir Group, respecting the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. It is moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Limited, in brackets CO Samir Group, respecting the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? That's carried. Discussion, Councillor Brennan?
This was discussed a little while ago, and this is the first of 3 bylaws to facilitate the construction of, I believe, 120 units at that address. And this is a site plan component of that. So it's good news for the town.
Thank you. Just correct, it's 110 units. And any further comments?
Sorry, 110.
Okay, can I have a third reading, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with J. Blackburn Construction, CO Samir Group, respecting the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10146/2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor Dwyer, the bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Ltd, in brackets CO Samir Group, respecting the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10146/2020. All in favor? And that is all hands up. That's carried. Councillor Dwyer, you have the next bylaw.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that a bylaw to stop up and close a portion of the Allen Street road allowance be received and read a first time and taken and read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, second by Councillor McGuire, the bylaw to stop up and close a portion of the Allen Street road allowance be received, read a first time, and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you. This bylaw pertains to the former bylaw and the next bylaw as well, related to the development of a property on Brockville Street. The municipality has previously declared this portion of the road allowance, it's a short portion, it's only about 66 feet wide by 120 feet deep, to be surplus to our needs, and thus we are divesting of the asset to J. Blackburn and Associates.
Any further discussion? Can I have a third reading, please?
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that a bylaw to stop up and close a portion of the Allen Street road allowance now be read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10147/2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, second by Councillor McGuire. The bylaw to stop up and close a portion of the Allen Street Road allowance being now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10147-2020. All in favor? That's carried. And we have one final bylaw with Councillor Albert, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of an affordable housing agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Limited, respecting 4 units in the apartment complex at the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alford, second by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of an affordable housing agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Ltd, respecting 4 units in the apartment complex at the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Alford.
Yes, Your Worship. This is a precedent-setting thing for Smiths Falls in entering into an affordable housing agreement with the developer. I know that all of council joins me in acknowledging Samur's group, the Samur group, for paying attention to people in our community, and the Samurs are known to be community supporters, that support affordable units in this 110 apartment complex, and we thank them for that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Can I have a third reading, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of an affordable housing agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Limited, respecting 4 units in the apartment complex at the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10148-2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alford, second by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of an affordable housing agreement with J. Blackburn Construction Ltd, respecting 4 units in the apartment complex at the property known as 260 Brockville Street, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10148-2020. All in favor? That's carried. I assume there's no inquiries or announcements. Councillor Brennan.
Just one, I just have one, and I want to give credit to the last questions I asked to Lisa at the Heritage House, but she sent me a number. I'm just going to ask one in the interest of time. And so the quiz today, what are the famous 5 of Smith Falls known for?
I had 8.
Dwyer.
I know what it
I'm
is.
gonna go with basketball.
Well, come on, Lorraine.
Oh,
Basketball?
Wendy, what is, it's your mother started it. What was-
Harold. That's the clue.
Harold.
Ducks?
What'd you say?
Carving?
Ducks.
Duck carving.
Carving.
Correct.
Oh,
Duck.
Just a quick one, because I'm not sure if everybody caught it or if we were even live at the time, but we've lost some really longtime residents, some people who've been very special in Falls, Clare Porter and Duxley. But we also added, when we added another McKenna, little Samuel McKenna made his debut since our last council meeting. So that's one of the joys of the opposite side of losing some very important people in our community. There's another McKenna.
Thank you. And our motion for adjournment is back to Councillor Alford.
I forgot about that one. That this council adjourn its proceedings at 8:15 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Moved by yourself, seconded by...
Moved by myself, seconded by Nikki Dwyer.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Alford, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. This council adjourns proceedings at, for what time? 8:15. 8:15 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? The hands are up before I can even finish. Okay. Thank you. Good night.